right, more life and times of George Washington. So after the siege of Boston and after the British evacuated Boston, the war, it moves south. And, that means, we have a shift in the theater, the ground has changed, right? And New York was nothing like Boston. It was larger, it was more divided between, those who favored the rebellion and those who favored the crown. It was also more exposed. And when Washington arrived in New York City, he faced problems that weren't relatively easy to solve. The city is, set on a collection of islands, and it's surrounded by water, and that means it's open to the world's strongest navy. The population, like I said, was, divided. There were some who would support the independent cause, but many didn't. Those loyalists, those Tories, lived, beside those patriots, often on the same streets. And Washington had to then defend a city that might not have his back. And so he ends up spreading his army rather thin across Manhattan and Long Island and surrounding positions. And there wasn't really a lot of good choices for him to make. If you concentrated your forces, then you risk being outflanked. If you spread yourself too thin, you risk being crushed, piece by piece. And, the British had a good understanding of New York and this style of terrain. They also, they controlled the sea. The Patriot cause really didn't have a navy that could stand up to the British Navy. And so they could the British could land wherever they wanted to. And then they arrive in overwhelming numbers. And Washington knew that a decisive battle at New York could end the war. But refusing battle could also, destroy morale. So whenever he had these options in front of him, all of them carried a degree of risk. And what happens in New York is any type of control, this illusion of control, is just stripped away. Logistics were still faltering, intelligence was often very unreliable, and time was on the side of the British here in New York. This was not a place where you could have some type of improvisation that would be, forgiven. Boston was more forgiving, especially when you consider what happened with the taking of the artillery from Fort Ticonderoga and the installing of it at Dorchester Heights. Any kind of mistakes or errors made here would be punished quickly, but also would be quite public. So as the war moved to New York, Washington entered a phase where survival, not victory, became the immediate goal for the Continental Army.